It has never happened before. Not like this. There have been quiet disagreements inside that clubhouse. There have been conversations behind closed doors that stayed behind closed doors the way conversations in winning organizations are supposed to. There have been moments of tension that dissolved before they became something larger because the people involved trusted each other enough to let them dissolve. But this was not that. When Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts stood up in that team meeting and pushed back against Dave Roberts, they were not doing it quietly. They were not doing it in the careful, diplomatic language of players who are managing a relationship they cannot afford to damage. They were doing it the way people do it when they have reached the point where staying quiet costs more than speaking does. And Dave Roberts had to stand in that room and listen. That moment, that specific moment in that meeting room inside Dodger Stadium, is where this story begins. To understand why that meeting happened, you have to understand what happened before it. The Dodgers made moves in the past 48 hours that the front office described as necessary. That word, necessary, is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Because the moves themselves, 2 pitchers designated for assignment in a single day, the pitching staff for the playoffs formally announced, and Roki Sasaki shifted into a closer role that nobody saw coming, were not the kind of moves that land softly inside a clubhouse. They land hard. Designating a pitcher for assignment means something specific in baseball. It means the organization has looked at that player, looked at what they need, looked at the road ahead, and decided that those 2 things no longer fit together. It is a business decision. Everyone inside professional baseball understands it as a business decision. But understanding something as a business decision and feeling it as a business decision are 2 different things. These were not players on the edges of the roster. These were not names that existed in the background of the bullpen, arms that the rest of the team had never fully integrated into the fabric of what they were building. They were part of the structure. They had been in the room through the hard games and the long road trips and the moments in the middle of a season when a team finds out what it is actually made of. And now they were gone. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the clubhouse had a different feeling in it. Not broken. Not panicked. But different. The kind of different that happens when a group of people who have been through something together look around the room and notice that the room has changed. Roberts addressed the team briefly before that afternoon's workout. He spoke about the future. About October. About what the organization believed this roster could do when the games that mattered most arrived. It was the right speech for the moment. He has given versions of it before. He knows how to find the words that a team needs to hear when it is processing something difficult. But this time, the words landed differently. Because this time, the team meeting that followed was not the team meeting Roberts had planned for. The meeting was supposed to be about preparation. About the playoff roster. About roles and responsibilities and the particular focus that a team needs to develop in September when October is visible on the horizon and every game carries the weight of what comes after it. It started that way. Roberts went through the pitching staff. He outlined the structure. He talked about matchups and leverage and the decisions the coaching staff had made about how to deploy the arms available to them. He was thorough. He was clear. He had thought through every piece of what he was presenting. And then Ohtani spoke. The room shifted when he did. Not dramatically. Not in the way a room shifts when someone says something explosive or unexpected. It shifted in the quieter way that rooms shift when someone who does not often choose to speak in these settings chooses to speak. Ohtani is not a man who fills silences unnecessarily. He does not dominate conversations. He does not make his presence felt through volume or assertion. He makes it felt through the particular weight that attaches itself to his words when he decides to use them. He spoke about the pitchers who had been designated for assignment. About what losing them meant for the bullpen structure. About what he felt the team was giving up in exchange for whatever the front office believed it was gaining. He was not angry. His voice carried no anger. But it carried something that was in some ways harder to hear than anger. It carried disappointment. And before Roberts could fully respond, Betts was speaking too. Betts came at it from a different angle. Where Ohtani had focused on what was lost, Betts focused on what was being asked of the remaining pitchers. About whether the structure Roberts had outlined was realistic given what the bullpen now looked like. About whether the plan on paper was the same as the plan that would hold up in October when the game stopped being something you could recover from. Two voices. Different approaches. The same fundamental message. We don't think this is right. Roberts listened. He did not interrupt. He did not become defensive in the way that managers sometimes become defensive when their decisions are challenged in a group setting. He sat with it. He let it finish. And then he answered. His answer was careful and honest and did not pretend that the concerns raised were without merit. He acknowledged what had been lost. He acknowledged that the bullpen looked different now than it had looked a week ago. He explained the reasoning behind the decisions without hiding behind the language of organizational necessity. But he also held his position. The moves had been made. The roster for October was taking shape. The plan was the plan. And now the work was to execute it. The meeting ended. Players filed out. The hallway outside was quiet. If the team meeting was the emotional center of these 48 hours, what happened on the practice field the following morning was the practical center. Roki Sasaki threw in his new role for the first time. The word closer carries weight in baseball that goes beyond the definition. It is not simply the pitcher who throws the ninth inning. It is a psychological designation. It requires a specific relationship with pressure, with high-leverage moments, with the knowledge that the margin for error has been reduced to almost nothing and that the people in the stands and the people in both dugouts understand this. Sasaki has the stuff for it. Nobody watching him throw has ever questioned the stuff. The fastball is real. The splitter is real. The movement is real. But closing is not just about stuff. And on that practice mound, in front of his teammates and the coaching staff and the particular attention that attaches to a first time doing anything, something in his mechanics showed the weight of the moment. The word that the coaches used quietly among themselves was rushing. He was rushing. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would be obvious to someone watching casually. But to the trained eyes of people who had spent careers watching pitchers, it was there. In the arm path. In the timing of his lower half. In the way his release point was sitting slightly forward of where it should be. Rushing is what pitchers do when the moment is bigger than the routine. When the body tries to accelerate through the pressure instead of slowing down inside it. It is one of the most common and most difficult things to correct because correcting it requires doing the opposite of what every instinct in a high-pressure moment tells you to do. Mark Prior watched from behind the mound. He said nothing during the session. He let Sasaki work through it. After the last pitch of the workout, he walked to the mound slowly and stood next to him for a few minutes. Whatever was said between them stayed between them. But Sasaki threw again in the afternoon. And the second session was better than the first. Not perfect. But better. By the time Roberts sat in front of the media that evening, he had been through 48 hours that would have tested anyone who has ever held a position of leadership inside a professional sports organization. He looked like someone who had been through 48 hours that tested him. But he also looked like someone who had come through the other side of them still standing. Still clear about where he was going. Still in possession of the particular steadiness that has defined his tenure in Los Angeles through the seasons that were easy and the seasons that were not. A reporter asked him directly about the team meeting. About the reports that Ohtani and Betts had pushed back against his decisions. Roberts nodded slowly before answering. I'm not going to tell you that everybody in that room agreed with every decision that was made. That's not how a real team works. That's not how a real conversation works. What I will tell you is that those two men care about winning. Everything they said came from that place. And I respect it. I respect them. But my job is to make the decisions. And I made them. And now we move forward together. A reporter asked about Sasaki's session on the practice mound. About the rushing. About whether the organization was confident in the transition. Roberts looked at the table for a moment before answering. Roki Sasaki is one of the most talented pitchers I have ever been around. What you saw today was a pitcher in his first session in a new role, with new responsibilities, on a new part of the stage. His voice was even. What I saw was someone who stayed on that mound until he got it better. That tells me everything I need to know about who he is. The room was quiet. Outside, the Dodgers were still processing everything that had happened. The pitchers who were gone. The roles that had changed. The meeting that nobody had expected to become what it became. October was still coming. Ready or not. And somewhere inside Dodger Stadium, in a weight room or a film room or a quiet corner of the clubhouse, Shohei Ohtani was still preparing for it. The way he always does. The way that makes everything else feel, somehow, slightly more possible.